Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to episode 80 of Talking Asperger's with Andrew. My name's Andrew Marsh, and I'm autistic. My representation of autism is Asperger's syndrome. And I now help employers manage people like me, autistic people, people with Asperger's syndrome, in their business. And I do that for two main reasons. One is I was diagnosed at 51, 8 years ago. So I've had a life of being different, not fitting in, and not knowing how to fit in, how to get on in groups with their work colleagues or friends or people at college, university. And so that was a main struggle of my life, is fitting in with people, particularly in the work situation. And the other reason is we have to be able to do better at managing everyone that comes into our businesses, whether they're from a different race, different creed, different color, different culture, speak a different language, whatever their difference is, whatever is different about them could just be the key that makes your business develop, grow stronger. They could be the key to solving a problem that you've had. And so it's really important that we employ people who are different, have different mindset, different way of thinking, because they'll come up with new products and services. So those are the two main reasons why I now work with employers to help them better manage autistic people like myself. And I have those 59 years now of lived experience of, okay, I now know I'm autistic. I've got Asperger's. How would I manage me? And yes, we have to say right here and now that when you've met one person who's autistic or you've met one person with Asperger's, that's exactly what you've just done. Met one person, and not everyone has the same representation. Everyone is different. So the next person you meet with Asperger's could be completely different to me. But we have some commonalities, and we have some trends and traits that tend to occur quite commonly amongst those of us on the spectrum. And it's addressing those things and talking to employers about how they do things to integrate and manage autistic people in their business, which is what I like to do. I say I've got 59 years of lived experience. I was a geologist for 23 years before I knew I had Asperger's. So fitting in the construction industry, which is known to be aggressive and quite a hard industry to master. So I have techniques and strategies that I've developed just to cope in that situation without knowing at the time that I had Asperger's. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about one of the most important parts of managing anyone. Doesn't matter whether they've got Asperger's, whether they're autistic. This is a skill that employers must be great at. They must be proficient and skilled at this, and that is change management. Change happens all the time. Change goes on all day, every day. Things happen, things change. And it's how you adapt to that, how you adapt your workforce to that, how you instruct them, how you guide them, how you help them through those changes that is the key thing. So change management is absolutely crucial for all businesses. And one of the things that autistic people hate most of all is change. I don't like change. I absolutely don't like change. I need to know what I'm doing, where I'm going to be, what's happening, what's going on. And for someone to change something at the last minute, like half an hour before I arrive or half an hour after I've arrived somewhere, oh, we're just doing this instead. That absolutely becomes a critical point of, I don't know how to cope with that change. You can't just bung this change on me, to dump this change on me and expect me to be all sweetness and light and carry on as though nothing's happened. Sometimes the impact of that change can be small. And with a bit of coercion and a bit of sitting down and discussing it with the autistic person, you can guide them as to what they want to do. Sometimes that change is fundamental. I'll give you an example. I was working on a government project. I have to be careful what I say because I'm governed by the Official Secrets Act. I was working for a government project, and we've been working on it for 6 to 9 months. We understood, and I was one of a satellite team to the main team, so I wasn't part of the main thrust of the project. I was a something that cropped out of the initial design, and we needed someone with my geotechnical skills to look at that. So I was very much as a satellite part of the project, still important, still needed to be integrated into the overall scheme of things and make sure that there was continuity between what my designs came up with to the other designs, and make sure that it all fitted together and gelled and was integrated into one solution to the client. So I'm sitting working away, and that was my only job. So I was full-time on this project for 6-9 months. And so I got to know some of the other team leaders and the project manager and the project director. Project manager, he had a tough job because he had lots of disciplines to manage. He had lots of interfaces with the client to manage, and he was doing a pretty good job. One day I'm sitting working away at my desk, and I can sense, and I've got my head down. This is before we had computers. Okay, this is before we had computers. This is the middle of the 1990s. So I'm working away, and I notice this shadow, and I can sense this presence right in front of my desk. I look up, and there's the project manager. And he looks as though someone has just told him, we're going to amputate your leg in the next 10 minutes. So say goodbye to your leg because it's coming off now. We've got 2 men with a hatchet and a needle full of anesthetic. Say goodbye to your leg. He was crestfallen. He was absolutely distraught. And he said, Andrew, we've got to stop. I said, stop what? Stop everything, he said. Client has decided we have to stop everything now. As in, stop working on it right now. And I looked at him and I said, okay, but I can't really stop right now. If you're absolutely telling me I have to stop right now, I will, but I'm in the middle of something. I've got a team of people. I've got 2 different teams of people working in different departments, working on what I am doing. And I know you know that. So I can't just stop and find 10 people work to do starting in half an hour's time. I can't do it. I'm not in charge of resourcing other departments. I'm not in charge of resourcing the department I work in. If you tell me to stop, my team gets allocated to other projects, you could come back to me tomorrow and say, right, we've got the go-ahead, we can start again. I'll say, sorry, we're not available for 4 months. We've been reassigned. I can't stop and then sit here at my desk doing nothing, waiting in hope that you're going to be able to phone me or come down and tell me we can restart again, because I would have been reallocated. The people in my team would have been reallocated. The people working in other teams that are working on my projects will have been reallocated, and they will not be able to be taken off that reallocation and work back on this project. So if you're telling me to stop, we will stop. Don't quite know what I'm going to do for the rest of the day, but we will stop. But I need you to understand, as I'm sure you do, I'm sure you standing there is not something you've ever wanted to do, because you've probably done it to several other people in different teams already today. But you must understand that when you tell me to stop and we reallocate our staff, there's nothing I can do to get them back or get me back. It could be months before I'm able to resource, or our department is able to resource this project again if we stop now. He said, yes, I understand that. I know that. I have no choice. We have to stop now. Okay, fine. I'll go and see my director, tell him that I've got people in my team who need reallocating work now, and that if you or your director turns up tomorrow and says, we need you all back, we can't do it. That needs to be understood. If you turn up and say, tomorrow we need to restart, we will be reallocated and we cannot change that. Understand? Yeah, he said, understand. I've got people in so many different departments. I've just had this very same conversation with you. So that's an extreme case of change. That change was stop what we'd done for 6 months. And when you're in consulting engineering and when you're in the service industry, your fees are based on your time. You have to allocate every hour of your day to a job that is fee earning. So I can't just sit there for 2 days twiddle my thumbs, do the crossword, and not allocate my time to a fee earning project. That would be a major problem for the business because they have no way of paying me. If I'm not earning fees that cover my salary, my pension, my expenses, my desk, the office overheads, and the proportion that is attributed to the directors and the running of the business and the administration and all of those things that goes up to making a fee, an hourly rate for someone's time, we can't just not do anything for 2 days, hoping that someone else is going to make a phone call and say, yeah, you can restart. Because I've done nothing for 2 days. I've got 16 hours of no fee earning time. And when you're charged out at 60, 65 pound an hour, 16 hours at 16 is 65 pound an hour, that becomes a lot of money very quickly. That's about £1,000, isn't it? Yeah. So some change is just so difficult to manage. But the important thing is when you come up with a change, and that change might not be as brutal as you've got to stop. That change might be, we've had additional instructions from the client, we're going to do this instead of that. We're going to go down route B rather than route A, which you've been going on. So we need to stop what we're doing. We need to get briefed about what we're going to be doing and what the new change is. And that is not, and I'm going to repeat this, that is not simply a case bunging a piece of paper on it and say, we're doing that now, get on with it. No. Any change has to come with an instruction. It has to come with an understanding of what you are going to do. Because if let's take the situation that I've just been in, just described, fee earning based on your time for your business. Suppose we put in a bid for a project. Let's just say it was £10,000 worth of fees based on hourly rates for several members of staff. Typical thing that we would do when preparing a bid or a project or a fee proposal. See how many hours of each person it would be, get the appropriate rate from your director, do the number crunching, and that would be the fee bid to be put to your director for clarification that it's okay. He might say, no, you've not got enough in there, or you've got too much, and then they make a final decision. So let's suppose we have a £10,000 fee budget, which is a reasonable project. And we've got this scope of work. We have defined the scope of work. There's a brief. There is a briefing document, which is either what we've received from the client, as the client says, I want you to put a fee proposal in to do this piece of work. So tell me how long it's going to take, how much it's going to take, and what you're going to do for that fee. Or it's a proposal that we're putting to the client, which might be saying, we're going to do this, this, and this. It's going to take X, Y, and Z. There's a fee at the end of it. And it's broken down into stages. So you might have done part one of this project, and you've been just told to change. So immediately, what you were going to do as part 2 and 3 isn't going to happen. So you've got to reevaluate your fee straight away from this new instruction. So just getting a sheet of paper that says, stop that, do that. You need to understand what that new brief is, what that new instruction is. And so you need your project manager, your project leader, to come and sit down with you and say, okay, we've been advised of a change by the client. This is what we're going to do. And that's where your project manager sits you down in a room. Takes the time to organize the room, to have tea and coffee and cups and biscuits available. You might think that's ridiculous, but if you're going to start off and make a change, you need to set the environment right, particularly if you have people who have autism or Asperger's. We do not take well to just being dumped something and say, go and do that instead of that. We go, whoa, what's it go? We need to understand. We need to understand why there's a change. We need to understand what the change is. The change might then take twice as long as the original fee bid. So you can't do it for £10,000. You might have spent £3,000 worth of fees up to date, but to do it might take another £16,000 worth of fees. You're going to need to clear that with the client so that they know that they've got a final bill is £3,000 plus £16,000. 19,000, not 10 that they originally perceived when we had the agreed bid. So that's just the managerial side of organizing a change. But you've then got the personnel side of organizing that change. And it's really important that you sit down, like I just said, in a meeting room with tea and coffee, cup of tea, and talk to your team. I'm going to use the 3 words that I use regularly on my webinars: be clear, be specific, be precise. Those 3 things are your obligation as an employer, to be clear, specific, and precise about what the change is. Because the people that are doing it might say, oh, that's quite big. That's going to take us extra time. That's going to take us longer time. We need support from other people, other teams, other specialists. We may even need to sub out some of that support to a third party. So we need to get their costs, their fees, or if it's a subcontractor, it may be a specific item of the design, a specialist item. So there will be a fee for that. There will be a cost or a price. So you have to incorporate that. So immediately you've got this change and you've got a third party has got to price it. Well, you've got to be very clear, specific, and precise about what it is you want them to do. Otherwise, they're going to come back with an offer that's completely meaningless. It says, we'll do it for X, but it doesn't include X, Y, Z, A, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items. It's meaningless. It's just a number on a piece of paper. They might say, yeah, we can do it for $3,000, but we haven't allowed for this, and this. And you need 4 of those 5 things that they've just said that they haven't allowed for in their bid. So you've got to go back to them. They've got to readdress it. They won't be happy that they've got to reprice it. But so you have to be clear, specific, and precise before giving anyone, whether that's your own teams or a third party, a change instruction so that they can then price it. It might take twice as long as the original program. Say for your original 10,000 fee, it was a 12-week program. And you've done part A, £3,000 worth of fees, and that's taken you 3 weeks. So in your original program, you had 7 weeks left and you had about £7,000 to spend. Well, that £7,000 is now dead. It doesn't exist anymore because you've made a change. That new price to take you from where you are to the end might be the £16,000 that I just said. And instead of being another 4 weeks, it's 12. Your client is going to want to know and has to approve £16,000 and another 12 weeks. They might go, we can't live with 12 weeks. We've got things happening on site that require to be done in 7 weeks. We need this answer in 7 weeks because we've got the best supplier in the country who we've waited 6 months to get to come and put this thing, to install this thing, or to build this thing with their specialist expert knowledge. We have to have this in 7 weeks. That's non-negotiable. So you go back and say, okay, fine, 7 weeks, in which case, to do that, we're going to need to put more resources on the project and do it in a shorter time, which might put the fee up. You might need 2 teams, you might need 3 teams, and you've then got to coordinate all those. That becomes important information that you need to plan, manage, and get confirmation from the client that they're happy. They'll be happy with this. Yeah, you can do it for the 7 weeks because we've got #1 supplier in the country coming to install it. So the 7 weeks is non-negotiable. How much is the fee? That's the managerial side of change, but then you've got the personnel. And so the personnel need to understand the nature of that change. And particularly people who are autistic or people like myself who have Asperger's, we need to understand why. And we need to understand what that is going to mean to us. And it might well be that we won't know straight away. We might have that meeting, that hour-long briefing with your project leader that says, this is the change, this is what I want you to do. And I would probably then need to sit down and go away and actually plan out what that's going to be for my segment, the bit that I'm working on, so that I can say it's going to take 14 days of my time, or it's going to take 25 days of my time. And I need to have these other people to support me because I've got aspects of the job that they need to help and support me with. So we need to plan and program those in. So all of a sudden, that simple thing like a phone call from the client and an email becomes a significant piece of managerial business. You have to make sure that you've organized it and the consequences of that change are made clear to the client in terms of time, in terms of quality. It might be that in doing this quicker, you might be sacrificing a bit of quality. The client's going to need to know that. They might say, no, we want the best quality because we've got number one contractor in the country coming to build this thing in 7 weeks' time. Can't sacrifice the quality. So you may need to put even more resources on it, which costs more money. And the people that are doing it need to understand how their element fits into the overall change so that they can adjust to it, they can understand what they're doing, they can know what their priorities are and which bit of that change they are going to tackle first. Because otherwise, if you just said to someone, anyone, doesn't matter whether they've got autism, Asperger's or anything like that, if you just to say to someone, this is the change, this is what we're doing, and the boss literally just walks around the office at 9 o'clock in the morning and dumps a piece of paper on 6 people's desks, says, that's what we're doing, get on with it. I can guarantee you it will fail. And if those 6 people who've had that piece of paper on their desk have got any sense of professionalism or, oh, hold on, that's not right, they will either individually or they will preferably gang up and say, we can't do this like this. We need to speak and sit down with this chap and find out what it is we're doing. So the leader's not going to get away with just dumping a piece of paper on 6 people's desks and say, go do that, guys. Because those people are going to say, this is not clear, this is not specific, this is not precise. I don't know what it is you expect of me to do. This is ambiguous. I need clarity. I need you to tell me specifically what it is you want us to do. And I'll tell you then how long I think it'll take me if I've got carte blanche. I might have to say, to meet the 7 weeks that the client needs to get the contractor who's going to build it, we need another one of me full time in that 7 weeks to be able to do this. And that person will need 2 or 3 people to support them with other skills and other aspects of the project to be able to do that. All of a sudden, you've got a cascading effect of simple, it's got to change, becomes something of its own entity and needs proper, effective leadership. Excuse me just a moment. So change is really, change management is really, really important. It's one of the things that will trip people up. I can guarantee you, if you've got a micromanaging manager, they will get tripped up by change because they're just constantly out. You constantly making minor changes. Do this, do that, do that, do that, do this, do that. No, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, do this, do that. It becomes to a point where you get overwhelmed. You don't know what it is you're supposed to be doing because this micromanager is on your back all the time. You can't work like that. So you need to be able to trust your staff to do the job that they've been paid to do. To do that, you need to brief them properly. So that if there is a change, you need to manage that change properly. And one of the things that I use in briefing someone, when I was the geologist in construction, when I was briefing someone or a team of people, I would have checklists. I love checklists. Checklists are your best friend. Get to know checklists, because by making a checklist of the 6 things, the 10 things, whatever it is that change requires and the knock-on effect it has through other aspects of the project, that checklist does 2 things. It galvanizes your leader's mind to think about all the differences that is going to happen, all the changes that are going to make, and the knock-on effects of that to the team individuals in your team, in your project team. So in galvanizing that team leader's thoughts, they're going to think about the things a little bit better and a little more detail and realize that, oh, that has a knock-on effect. We need a piece of software to do this, and it's going to take someone 3 days to run the analysis. need to make sure that's programmed in. That wasn't in the original thing. So that 3 days of analysis might be another £1,000, might be £2,000. So immediately you've got to fit that in. And if you're going to be doing analysis for something, you're probably going to need that to do near the beginning, having established your parameters that you're putting in. So you may need to do that first, establish your parameters that are going in to the analysis, run the analysis so that the output you can then use with the next part of the design or whatever the situation is on your project. Immediately, you've just got £1,000 or £2,000 worth of analysis and someone to run it. So you may have a person spending 2 or 3 days. That has fees implications. So immediately that happens, you've got analysis, you've got software costs, you've got someone to run it, you've got someone to review it, you've got someone to understand that the output makes sense. Never, ever trust the output of something until you've looked at it and thought, that's about the right number. Particularly if you're using spreadsheets, which I'm sure most of you are, for summarizing data, information, fees, costs, all of these things. Never just stick all the numbers in, press the button, and get an answer. You have to have an idea of what that answer will be. So that if you're doing all your analysis and you're, let's say we're talking about fees because we have been in this webinar. You put all the numbers in, people's time, their hourly rates, subcontractors, subconsultants, analysis, all of those things, stick it in your master spreadsheet. You get an answer of £26,000. Does that feel right? Does it feel like £26,000 worth of fees? Or does it feel like £12,000 worth of fees and you've got a decimal point in the wrong place on 1 or 2 people's hourly rates or the subconsultant? Or does it feel, actually, this feels more like a £45,000 job and I've just come in at 26? Never, ever accept the answer that comes out of any analysis until you have a feel for whether you think that is right or wrong. And check it. Check it. Go back and check. Absolutely fundamental part of business is to check your inputs and check your outputs and are the two congruent? Do they make sense? One of the things that I used to do quite a lot of, and that was using computers, because we did have the odd computer in a dark corner of the room to run slope stability analysis for soil and rock slopes. And as you could imagine, there are a lot of complicated parameters of the soil that have to be input into the program to be able to get an answer. And the sensitivity of changing 1 or 2 of those parameters can have significant bearing on the output. Whether a slope is going to be stable or whether it's not stable, or whether it's at that, I'm not quite sure we've got enough factor of safety. If you don't understand the input, the output is meaningless. Okay? So if you've put in conservative parameters and you get an output that says this slope's about to fail, factor of safety is 1 or 0.95 or something like that, you've got to think to yourself, have I made a mistake in putting these parameters? Because I put in conservative parameters. I put in quite high numbers. I should be getting a high factor of safety out of this. I should be getting an acceptable factor of safety out of this, but I've got 1.95. Does it feel right? I know I'm getting off piste a bit, but if you're doing those things and you're putting in a fee bid and you've made a change, does that change make sense? Does it stack up? You've got 6 people, they've got an hourly rate of varying from £35 to £65 an hour. Got an answer of £17,000. That doesn't feel right. Trust your instinct on that and check. Because if you don't check and you send it off, you tell the client, yeah, we can do this for another £17,000. What happens when you're 5 weeks in and you're at £20,000 worth of fee spent? Oh, you're in trouble. You are in dire trouble. Client's not going to pay anymore. You've told them you could do it for 17 grand, but actually it was 25 or 28. You could be taking a hit of 10 grand on that project. Always, always trust your gut and do a check of any analysis you do, any input that you're putting into a spreadsheet or even a calculator. 20 times 50 is 1,000. So if you put 20 times 50 in your calculator and you get 487, you know you've made a mistake. You've done something, pressed the wrong button or something like that, or input the wrong parameters, the wrong numbers. If you're multiplying, bearing in mind that we just said 20 times 50 is 1,000, okay? Maybe your numbers aren't 20 and 50. Maybe it's 19 and it's 51. 19 times 51. But your answer should be about 1,000 because 19 is nearly 20 and 51 is nearly 50. So your answer should be about 1,000. So if you get an answer that's 1,600, you know you've input something wrong. Always check and make sure that the answer you get from any analysis makes sense. So in our situation where we've made a change after a third of the project is done, and you've then had to extend the time and extend the costs, make sure that you check that, and you make sure that all of the people on your team know what it is you've asked them to do, you're expecting them to do, and give them time to come back to you and say, I'll need to think about how long I think that's going to take me. I'll come back to you later on today, before close of business today. I'll come back and let you know. That's perfectly acceptable. That's more acceptable than them just saying, yeah, yeah, a couple of days, mate, be all right. Yeah, don't do the couple of days, mate, be all right. Don't be one of those. Make sure you've checked. Do you understand your input parameters? Do you understand what you've been asked to do? Have you put sufficient time, skill, expertise into that to be able to get the right answer? And then make sure that the answer makes sense. Really important. If you're putting in we regularly tendered ground investigation contracts out to contractors. And so we might have 3, 4, 5 contractors, depending on the size of the project, nature of the project. And we would do an arithmetic check by hand. These were days before computers. We would do an arithmetic check by hand of every single calculation in those tenders when they came back to us. Every single one. Because if a contractor has made a mistake, you have to tell them. They may not be allowed to change it. No, you put in £7 for this item when you really meant 70, but you've put 7. The only thing the contractor can do is to say, unfortunately, we are not able to stand by our price and we are withdrawing our tender because we cannot do that item. There's sufficient quantity of it for us to be not economical for us to do. So we would rather withdraw our tender than pay £7 for something that is £70 per unit. That's it. You can't change it. You're not allowed to change it. Because if you say to a contractor, oh, he's changed his numbers and he's got it lower than the other lowest tender, than the previous lowest tender, you're going to then start a subsequent bidding war. That becomes totally unprofessional. You just don't do that. I worked on a roads project around Manchester that tendered at £101 million. The contractor made a mistake in his numbers, and they put £7, and they thought it was they thought they were asking for a daily rate for something, and it was an hourly rate. So they put £7 an hour instead of 56, 60, 65 pounds a day. As it happened, there wasn't a significant quantity for that activity. And on the £101 million project, the contractor accepted that they would just have to live with that change, live with that error and not make the change to their tender. So fundamentally important that you check your numbers. And you check some, like when we do our tender reports, we will check the arithmetic on every single item in that bill of quantities in that tender. We check every single one. And then the subsequent adding up, page 1, page 2, page 3, section 1, section 2, section 3. We did the whole lot. We checked everything, every single calculation, because you had to know that it was right. Change management is so important because change happens all the time. I don't like change. I'll freely admit that. If we're putting people into change or not change, stick me in the not change category. That'd be fine for me. Thank you very much. Give me my brief. Let me get on with what I'm doing, and I'll do it well, effectively, efficiently, within the time that we've agreed, generally. Unless I don't think I can do it for that, and I've told you beforehand. That's a separate argument. So change management is really important. You have to identify what it is that you're making the change on. Is that technical? Is that managerial? Is it going to cost 2 or 3 times the amount of labor, the amount of skill, the amount of expertise? Do you need additional resources? Do you need to subcontract or subconsult, etc., etc., etc.? So that simple thing, like the client saying, I want the car park to be twice the size. Ooh, that might have planning implications. Planning authority approval might not want you to have 164 spaces, car park spaces at your building. They might only allow you 80. So to suddenly change to say we want 164 spaces outside our building, sorry, planning regulation says you can only have 80. Do you then want to risk going back to planning for the whole project to try and get approval for your 164 parking spaces when planning only accepted 80 in the approved plans that you have? That's a major issue. That's not just a case of, we'll take a bit of the landscaping area out and stick in another 64 parking spaces or whatever the number is. That's something you can't just do carte blanche. That has a knock-on effect. And that knock-on effect in this instance was planning. Why, you may ask, will there be limits on the number of parking spaces that a business can have outside its premises? That's a separate issue. That's a planning issue, but it has to do with many factors, but it has to do with the number of journeys in and out. Is the road junction sufficiently well designed to accommodate those numbers of traffic? Is there a knock-on effect with the roundabout down the road, or the junction down the road, or the set of traffic lights down the road? A whole gambit of scenarios and situations can come into play just because the client has said they want to increase from 80 to 164 parking spaces outside their building. That might not get planning approval, which might stop the whole job, boom, in its tracks. So be very aware that what might seemingly be, oh, it's just a small change, just a few extra car parking spaces, no problem, suddenly becomes an issue. It's going to cost. If there was no planning issue and they got, and it was okay and there was approval, well, making a car park that's 80 spaces and making a car park that's 164 spaces, it's about twice. So you've increased your car park by a factor of 2. The costs of your car park are going to go up by a factor of 2. Might go up by more than a factor of 2 because you may have to put more drainage in. Suddenly that's another knock-on. You might have to take more material off-site to landfill than you would have done previously because you had the area to landscape, and so you could mound. If you've taken away the area where that mound was, that material that could have been in the mound has to go off-site. And taking material off-site to landfill is extortionately expensive. Incredibly expensive. And the environmental implications of that are huge. So just a simple thing like, let's go from 80 to 164 car parking spaces outside the building could be a showstopper. Let's suppose you get planning approval. It might put £1 million onto the cost of the job because you've got to take material off-site that you would otherwise have put in a mound. That might be a showstopper. £1 million just to connect to 84 places on your car park. This is where the leaders need to understand the impact and the consequences of the change you're making isn't just necessarily in straight, oh, we've extended the amount of time, it's going to cost us an extra pro rata on our fees. Might not be as simple as that. It probably won't be as simple as that. The knock-on effects to the construction costs might not be as simple as that. Could be hugely significant. Could impact planning, could impact environmental, which is part of planning, but within its own field, the environmental impact could be, it could just be that extending that car park impacts a burn that has got protected rights, or is in a triple SI, or is in an area of outstanding natural beauty, and you can't dig up the burn or redirect it. You can't touch that burn. You've got to be 10 meters off that burn with anything. The only thing you can put within 10 meters of that burn is to plant some trees on the landscaping mound. So all of a sudden, you could have an impact on something very, very significant that could be a showstopper. So it's really fundamentally important that when you've got a change, you understand the nature of that change in detail so that you can price it, you can cost it, you can resource it, you can see how it impacts other things all the way down the line. Excuse me just a moment. And that's not saying that the person at the blunt end of it, your autistic person, your person with Asperger syndrome, isn't going to struggle to accept that change. I don't know how to do. I can't cope with this change. This is another change that you've made, because we like order, we like structure, we like to know what's going on. So just making a change could fundamentally upset our mindset, could lead us to having a meltdown. It could lead us to having time off sick because they can't cope with the stress of yet another change. And I've got to keep adjusting to all these things. Becomes something that can impact someone's mental health. So be very careful about making changes. Whether you think they're small and insignificant, they won't be. No change is ever small and insignificant. In the construction industry, trust me, there is no such thing as a small, insignificant change. Everything has an impact. Be aware of that, manage that, and instruct and guide and brief your teams on what that change is so that you can adequately account for it in however your costings or your resourcings are for that project and the impact of that on your client or other parties. Because that silly, apparent, relatively simple example of changing your car park from 80 spaces to 164 could be a showstopper. If you've got a protected burn, if you've got a triple SI, if you're going to have to take off 10,000 cube of material at, I don't know, £25 a cube. If it's contaminated, it could be £100 a cube. 10,000 cube of material at £100 a cube is £1 million. See how quickly you get to significant numbers. So that's today's topic, and that's talking about change management. If you'd like to know more about how to manage Asperger syndrome in the workplace or autism in the workplace, please do get in touch. You can get in touch with me on my website, which is directly there. I can always never get my fingers in the right place. There we go, up there, over my shoulder. Andrew, our email is andrew@aspergersmatters.com, or you can get me on my website, which is aspergersmatters.com, and there's a contact form on there. Please feel free to get in touch. I'd love to have a free consultation with you to see how I can help you manage Asperger syndrome in the workplace. And on my YouTube channel, which is where all of my videos go, every single video on my Talking Asperger's with Andrew is on my YouTube channel. So please look it up, like, subscribe. It helps with my numbers, helps me build my audience, and helps me to help you better. So if there's anything I can help you with, please do get in touch. Keep a lookout for Friday or Saturday on what next week's topic will be. And this video will be uploaded to my YouTube channel along with the other 79 videos from the previous 79 weeks. And it's all there on YouTube as a free resource for anyone to use. There's bound to be something under there that it can be really useful to you. So please feel free to have a look, get in touch, and let's see if I can help you out in the best way that I can. So that's all for this week. Take care. See you next week. Goodbye.